Today's guest has quietly been dominating the Kansas City real estate market, going from only 600 followers to over 200,000, being dubbed as the honorary mayor of Waldo, where I was born and raised, and he's now a transplant, and he's also the brains behind the publishing companies Moving to KC and the KC Scene. Today, we have Kyle Talbert. Welcome on, man.
I don't think I've gotten an intro like that before, so appreciate you. Yeah.
Yeah, we like to start it off on a good foot, man. We like to start it off on a good foot. So, first guest on the Underdog Chronicles. Welcome on. Thanks for being the first guest.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. So, you're obviously making huge waves in the Kansas City market, but we got people listening from all over. So, if anybody doesn't know who you are, maybe they haven't seen you in the KC area, or maybe they have and they're listening from out of town, give everybody a rundown on who you are and what you do.
Yeah, my name's Kyle. I'm a 39-year-old father of 4 boys. And I started a real estate company about 3 years ago and decided that I was going to make content creation my niche. And it actually started out, it's funny you mentioned people who don't live in Kansas City. That was kind of the idea behind my YouTube channel was a relocation channel. So anybody that was thinking of moving to KC, I did YouTube videos just on, pros and cons, what it's like living here, different area tours, that sort of thing. And then it's just over the last few years evolved into kind of a full-blown media company and brand. And if you don't live in Kansas City, you probably don't know who I am. But if you live in Kansas City, there's a chance that you've seen some of my videos. So.
There's no way you don't know who this dude is.
Yeah.
If you're either looking to move to KC or you're in Kansas City, you definitely know. Yeah. So I'm curious. So 36, getting into real estate, right? Because that's about how old you were 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
What were you doing before that?
So it's funny because I just talked to another agent in a different market, and he's like, "Do you have a W-2 gig too?" Because when you're in real estate, you're just basically a 1099 salesperson. But I've been in 1099 sales for like the last 10, 15 years. So before I got into this, I was working for my cousin's company selling siding, roofing, and gutters. And before I moved back to KC, I actually owned a roofing company out there. And so that was kind of my background, is just sales and grinding, man, going out, knocking doors, making relationships with insurance agents, climbing on roofs, working with insurance companies, kind of doing that whole deal. And then in between kind of the sales and marketing gigs, I actually worked construction for a little bit. So I always tell people that like real estate was the perfect combination of all my skill sets. Like you have to know how to, sell, right? Which I think is one of the most important universal traits that you can have as an entrepreneur. And then I know houses because I've been on roofs, I've been in basements, I've gutted kitchens and all of these things. And so, it makes me a really effective real estate agent, especially for somebody who is thinking about moving across the country to a different market. It's already scary enough. And then add on top of that your agent is looking at this house and kind of like your eyes and ears and boots on the ground, and you're trusting them completely to tell you like this is a good house. And so that's really served me well in this transition, because we've sold a lot of like millions of dollars in real estate to people who they never set foot in the house until they closed. And that's a lot of pressure, but it's also a lot of trust.
Yeah. No kidding, man.
Yeah.
So I found it interesting. Like you said, it's kind of the perfect blend of all of these things. Cause like, it sounds like the roofing company you own was successful before coming out here, but if you're making content around roofing, it's a little bit of a different game and probably way harder than doing a property. There's a very visually appealing element when it comes to real estate, as opposed to like, here's some shingles, So was that like part of the deciding factor when you were looking to get into real estate, or like, because I feel like you probably could have gone any which way with sales and content creation. I mean, like it's kind of the king and the queen for getting attention and then converting those eyeballs into paying clients.
Yeah. So Again, I've been in sales and marketing for my entire career, and I've knocked doors, I've cold called, I've built relationships through networking. And what I found is that like it's just a lot easier. Sales in general is like very challenging. It's hard to, like I really admire an agent that gets Zillow leads, and that's their main form of business because they're constantly having to sell themselves. And so, I'm almost 40 years old. I've been in the game for a really long time, and I, kind of, it was cool to come into real estate at this stage in life. Because I just looked at it through a different lens. Instead of I need to get clients, it was like, how do I want to get clients? And I just started like going down the list of ways that traditional real estate agents get leads and clients. And I was like, I don't want to cold call. I've done enough of that. I don't want to knock doors. I've done enough of that. I don't want to, honestly, I don't want to do like networking events and stuff like that. I don't want to do open houses. I did a few of those and they were like just so emotionally draining. And so I started like looking at how other agents built their businesses, and I found a few agents that were using content and leveraging that and building these really cool brands. And I was just like, I was like, if I did something like this, then people would be reaching out to me and it wouldn't be me having to sell myself, which is exactly how it's played out in, my 3 years of being in real estate. Is when people reach out to me now, it's not a matter of me having to sell myself to them. They
Yeah.
already want to work with me because they know who I am. I had a conversation with a client last week, and he and his wife and daughter sat in the room with me, and he was like just smiling the whole time. He's like, man, I've watched all of your videos, and that's really how a lot of those conversations go. They're fans, and so I think it's, again, there's all of these conversations around building a brand, and I just used social media to leverage that, and then the other side of that I think doesn't get talked about enough is that I actually just enjoy making content. And I think that is the magic sauce. Like there are a lot of agents that just don't like doing it, and I started shooting videos. I was like, I like I don't feel like I'm super natural on camera, but I just really enjoy the process of like the creative side of it.
Yeah.
Like how am I going to shoot this? How can I make this look better? How can I draft a better hook? Is it going to be a visual hook or a verbal hook? And so like that side of it just really fascinates me. And then I got super into the analytics, and then it was just game over.
You're speaking my language, man.
Yeah.
You're speaking my language. So if someone was like listening right now and they're kind of like, yeah, I want to do it, but maybe they have shiny object syndrome, or they're like a lot of real estate agents where as soon as the market's hot, them and their mother, of course, go and get the real estate license to start selling houses, right? And of course, they're fighting over all those leads. They haven't necessarily shifted the demand in their favor like you have, like a Josh Altman has, like a Ryan Serhant has, where they got the deal flow coming to them. What would you say to somebody who like, is on the point of making that breakthrough, but maybe they're thinking about giving up, or they're questioning whether or not they should continue through when they haven't necessarily seen the light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of like finding out what you think you can do long term, right? Because again, going back to what we just talked about, I ran into an agent at an event a week ago, and she was like, I got my license the same time you did, and I saw you doing all these videos, and I made like 5 videos, and I was like, I'm going to do the same thing. And then it took me like so much time to make this content, and I hated it. And so I was like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Mhm.
And so she found what her niche was, and she's still a successful agent doing real estate transactions, but she doesn't do social media. And I think, there's kind of this right now, this pressure for a lot of people, like that you have to be on social media. And I think that's true, like in some capacity, but at the scale in which I do it, It's a full-time job. I like a lot of my team infrastructure is not necessarily built around the real estate side of the business. It's built around the content side. And so I have a business operations manager that's full-time, making a really great salary, and she has no real estate background whatsoever. But I needed somebody to come into my business because I have all, shiny object syndrome. I still get it.
Me
Like
too,
I have
man.
all of these ideas, man. I'm just like, oh, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. But it's like every one of those ideas takes away from what is working,
Yeah.
and the reality is like we needed to get efficient at our systems and processes for being consistent with what we're currently posting and then elevating that
Mm.
before we even consider what the next thing is, right? And I think that is what I would tell a lot of people is like, okay, what can you see yourself doing for the next 20 years without getting burnt out? Because a lot of people can't do content like this and not get burnt out. Like it's a lot of work. And like there are days where I'm like, man, I don't want to turn the camera on, but I have to have a video this week. And so if and then the other side of it is like, you can still do social media and content creation at just a smaller scale, like be more authentic. I think people connect really with like stories and, authenticity. And that's something that honestly doesn't really come through in a lot of my content, because it is more value driven, like, current events, entertainment, things that are going on around Kansas City. And so my story is not really woven in, and ingrained in that, like as thick as it probably should be. But I think that's what people, especially in the new digital world and, 3 or 4 years ago from now, and we're seeing it now, but all of this AI produced content that's coming out, I think people are going to be more attracted to like a real person with a real
Totally.
story about real life.
Totally. Yeah, so I own a marketing agency and I had a conversation with a client the other day. He was like, "Hey man, I'm thinking about this and this and this." And he brought like 20 different marketing ideas to me after we had already decided on one.
Mm.
And I was like, "Hey man, look, at the end of the day, they all work. But what people don't tell you is that they're all most likely going to take the same amount of time to get to work." And so I always recommend that people kind of, if they're starting out at least, kind of take a buffet approach to see what they like. So when I started, I was doing cold calls, cold email, I was running some ads, I was doing content, I was going to the networking events. And one of them I was really good at, but it wasn't bringing anything to me.
Mm.
And the other one I was like decently good at, and I like doing it, and it was able to kind of, bear fruits as opposed to, I might love doing this thing, but if it's not actually bringing in any revenue or leads, or it's just not, it's more of a hobby than an actual media channel or marketing channel. It's great. You can still do it, but, I like to always do a buffet approach to see what are you good at that you like to do and you can do over the long term. So with that being said, was there any specific point or like video that you remember just popped off and it was like, oh, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, there was, but I want to say something about what you just said. First of all, there's a book called The One Thing, and it's actually
Gary Keller.
yeah, yeah. So, and I read that book way before I got into real estate. And so once I kind of got scratched that itch and like caught the bug for content, I was like determined to make this my one thing, and to your point about like you were doing something that you really enjoyed and you were good at, but it wasn't producing leads. I didn't sell a house from YouTube for 9 months. Like I was dropping a video every week from January till September. And in September of 2023 is when I got closed my first transaction.
No
And it
kidding.
was a nightmare. Like literally the worst client that I ever had in my entire real estate career was my first YouTube client.
We're not going to say names.
No, I'm
If
not
you're
gonna
watching this,
say.
you're actually his favorite client. No, I'm just kidding.
But a lot of people would have thrown in the towel way earlier. But I just kept believing that it was going to work, man, because and yeah, I had doubts along the way because like 3 or 4 months in, I got a really solid lead from YouTube, and I showed them two houses, and then they fired me. And it's the only client that's ever fired me. It was my
What?
first like really good YouTube lead. And I was pumped when I got him, man. Like literally I posted the video on social media. At the time, my neighbor was my broker, and I was in my basement studio at my house, and I got off the phone with this guy, and he's like, "Yeah, I have an $800,000 budget. I'm looking in Brookside. It's where I lived." I'm like, "Oh my god, this is what I've been working for." You know what I mean? And I literally ran out of the house to my broker's house next door, and he was on the front porch, and like, he has a Ring doorbell security system, and I can actually show you the video, but I like literally ran and like jump. He's like 6'6". I like jumped in his arms, and I was like in tears, because at that point I'd worked so hard on like putting this stuff out there. Nobody really like knew what I was doing because it was so new. And, like there were no other like really big creators in Kansas City that were using that to, build a real estate business. And that was like my first confirmation. And then he fired me. And then, the next deal, it was like, terrible, terrible situation with this client. And so it's like, those are my first two really solid leads and experiences. It's like, I should have just given up, but after that, it just snowballed. It's like my first year, I was working part-time and doing sales for my cousin's siding and roofing company while I was building my online presence. And I did 7 transactions in 2023, which is not enough to support my family. And then the next year we did 41, and 90% of those were from social media. And so you just like, if you really enjoy something, doing something, and you believe in it, like my advice is to keep going with that, because I was like, this is either going to work exactly how I think it's going to work, or I'm going to fail and I'm just going to start over and do something else. And I stuck with it, and it worked out, so, and now I forgot your other question.
I don't remember either. How many transactions are you guys on pace to do this year?
So we've done 45 transactions for 23 million in volume. Last year we did 41 transactions for 15 million in volume. So we've done about the same transactions, but we increased our average price point, which is huge. So it's like the working smarter, not harder, and I just have way more brand authority right now that my content's way better. You go look at some of my first videos and they're not good. And that reminds me of the question you asked me, which was there one video that popped off?
That's right.
That I was like, okay, this is what, this is going to work. And it was actually a video that I did. So up until April of 2023, the only videos that I did were like solely on relocation content, like
that was
pros
like
and cons, pros and cons of moving to Kansas City, like pros and cons of living in Overland Park, pros and, like all these pros and cons videos, and then like top 10 neighborhoods and stuff like that. And then in April, I had this idea because it was like around the time when Penway Point was starting to get talked about, and which is a development downtown in the Crossroads. And then there's this like cool bridge, the Rock Island Bridge, that I've done a ton of content on. All of that, like original, like the new, when it was new stories, like nobody was really talking about it in this way. I was like, I'm gonna make a YouTube video about this, and I'm also going to talk about the draft, which was happening that April, and I'm going to release it the week of the draft. And so I did this video. It was like 8 minutes long, and it was like, Kansas City, is booming. There's like all this development. In this video, we're going to talk about 7 developments, and the draft is coming this week. So if you're coming to the draft, like, here's some things about it, blah, blah, blah. And so I post it, and like that weekend, it just like rocket ship. Like I posted on Monday, and I think it was around Wednesday, I started watching like the trend line, and it's like, usually it shows you like what your average views are in a little channel, and it's like going like this, you know what I mean? And like by the end of the weekend, I had 3,000 views on my video, which was the most watched video on my channel. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a real YouTuber now. And so I posted that, and, I think before I unlisted it, because it wasn't evergreen, and, it was terrible. By the time I unlisted it, it had like 50,000 views. But that video, it did 2 things for me. It validated me. but it also kind of changed the trajectory of the content that I did, because after I did that video, I realized that, there's a there's a place where people are seeking this type of information. Like they want to know about these developments without having to go and read an article. They want to watch a video about it. And so now kind of our subset of videos that we release on my YouTube channel, every month we do a development video. And it's just like either hyper focused in on one development, or like we actually, now I had it's funny because I mentioned the Rock Island Bridge. I had lunch with the developer 2 months ago because of content. And before they open, he's going to have us out and we're going to do like a walkthrough interview, and kind of like a pre-release of like, this is what it's going to be like and everything, which they're getting really close. So it's done a lot of things for my business, including like introduced me to really cool people. So
Nice, man.
yeah.
That's awesome. So obviously there's different skills that somebody can acquire. I know you mentioned sales, for example, is a skill that has served you for the past, 15, 20 years? And now content creation.
My entire career. Yeah.
Yeah. And now content creation. And if you had to go back in time and tell yourself, whether it's 3 years ago or 15 years ago, what's one skill that you would double down on, knowing what you know now, and how would you go about learning or perfecting that skill?
It would be on storytelling and writing. Probably, I feel like those go hand in hand. And I don't think I'm gifted at either of them. So the sales and marketing has actually served me really well in my content creation journey, because when I went through all, I worked for Fortune 500 company doing cold calls for 5 years. And then a couple of different roofing companies along the way. I worked for a company that sold leads to attorneys. So in all of those different companies, they had their own training programs, or they brought in outside people to do the training. And, it was through all of that taught me, like, enthusiasm in your voice when you're talking about something that maybe you don't really care about,
Sure.
And so, like, when you're selling a shingle to somebody, right?
How passionate can you really get?
Turns out you can get pretty passionate about shingle. And I did, man. And so it's like, but that is honestly like really served me so well in content creation, because I think when people flip on a camera and they just like start talking in a super monotone and robotic voice because they don't know what, it's like, it's not like you and I having this conversation right now.
Yeah.
All of a sudden they're like on the spot and you freeze. Right. And so, that, training and like emphasizing certain words and using voice fluctuation and that sort of thing helps me when I'm reading a script. It makes it sound like I'm not reading a script.
Yeah.
Because when a lot of people read scripts, it sounds like they're just reading, out of a book or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that, the sales and marketing background is something that I would definitely suggest for anybody, because I think it is like a universally, good trait to have as an entrepreneur or a business person. Like, to be able to sell somebody something is an unbelievable skill to have. But what I don't feel like I'm good at is storytelling. I don't feel like I'm as good as of a storyteller. And I was actually talking to Jordan about this before. I was like, man, I wish I was like a pastor. You know what I mean? Like, because I could sit down and listen to a pastor like all day, because they're so good at like weaving in scripture into like everyday stories. And that's something I really struggle with.
Yeah.
So if I could go back in time, I would like take a writing class, or, invest in some storytelling, kind of class that I could go through or something like that. But
nice.
Yeah.
Really good book that I've enjoyed reading. Are you much of a reader? Not really.
No.
Okay. Audible,
I'm too ADHD.
video.
I'm too ADHD that
You a visual guy?
Yeah, I'm a Audible guy. Yeah.
Okay. Audible. Yeah. So, the hero. What is it? The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell basically talks about the and what's the other guy's name? Do you know who I'm talking about, Jordan? There's a screen performer, Michael something. I'll shoot you the audio book, but it's really good. It's like a 2 hour listen, and it basically talks about the hero's journey that's used in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
cinematic stuff. You know?
I've heard about that through. I mean, I feel like it's been retold and repackaged by a few different authors.
Hmm.
But a 2 hour read is right up my alley. So
Nice. Yeah.
definitely send it over.
So there's some clients that I work with, right? On the advertising spectrum, there's like super direct advertising, which is like Geico. Hey, we're going to save you 15% or more on your car insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's super indirect advertising as well. And pretty much the most indirect that you can go is news, right? Proclamation, here's what's going to happen. Or in your case, right? Here's what's coming to town. Here's the
Mm-hmm.
current events. And the second one is storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
because it's kind of a subconscious thing. Humans are just wired that when you hear somebody telling a story, if you have affinity with that character, you put yourself in that person's shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the advertising now that I do and that I have my clients do actually is around either stories of themselves or stories of the clients and the people that they've helped,
Mm-hmm.
because it allows the prospect to put themselves in that person's shoes who's already gotten the result. And it's like way easier, in my opinion, to persuade somebody after they've been told a story and they've gone through that emotional journey. Because I'm sure you're aware, right? You sell on emotion and you justify with logic, is a
Mm-hmm.
really big quote. Well, what better to get somebody emotionally involved than having them go through the emotions in a story?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I've been seeing that a lot. And trust me, I used to be the guy that was like, do the offer, go straight for the jugular, straight for the throat. But man, when everybody's doing the same thing, right? Like I'm sure there's tons of real estate agents that it's just like, we'll sell your house, guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
But for you, it's like you have the news piece, you have the story piece coming in. So that's really interesting that you chose storytelling as your number one. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And I mean, to your point, like, I think my one like core reason for doing content and why I believe that I've been successful is it's just been about delivering a ton of value, right?
Mhm.
And so like I just I make a lot of like the amount of time and energy and money that goes into making the content that we produce. I mean it's obscene, right? Like, but I don't have a marketing budget, right? We don't do traditional marketing.
Mhm.
That is my marketing, and as a result, I don't have to sell. Like, I've never heard the, you know, sell emotion logic, whatever you just said. Like, I kind of got out of the whole like sales process
Mhm.
and just focused on delivering value because when you talk when you go to like a conference or a training or you listen to a podcast, I mean, in real estate and across the board, when it comes to selling products, it's like, what value are you delivering?
Mhm.
And I think there's an interesting story about the Michelin brothers. Have you ever heard that story? They
Uh-uh.
sell, obviously Michelin brand is huge, but one of the brothers started the Michelin Guide, and the reason he started the Michelin Guide because he was like, the idea behind it was to release this for free and give it to people so that they could read about places that they want to go and try new things. And as
Mm.
a result, they would wear down their tires and they would need to buy more tires.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so, but the Michelin Guide has always just been like, and now it's like this renowned thing where you have like chefs that are devastated if they lose their Michelin star, but it all started because of tires. Like a guy was just
No
trying to sell more
kidding.
tires. And so he's like, how can I deliver a ton of value for free that is going to make people use my product more? And that's really when I heard that story, I was like, that's exactly what I'm doing. Because
Mhm.
now we have a YouTube channel, but we have the KC Scene, which is like a media company. And now we have a newsletter, which is, it goes out every Friday. And it's like, here are the top events that are happening this weekend. Here's a list of concerts that are happening throughout the week. Here are the top stories that you should know about. Oh, and by the way, at the bottom, I sell real estate. And if you ever need to buy or sell in, Kansas City or you're relocating, you can get in touch with me here. And so it's like people remember that. Like, and my philosophy has always been like, I started out doing home tours and market update videos. But the percentage of people who are looking to buy and sell houses right now is tiny. And so,
3%.
but I have 200,000 followers with probably 80% of them that either live in the metro or have like a really vested interest in Kansas City. And probably 90% of them aren't looking to buy and sell right now. But at some point they might. And who's going to be in front of their feed, every time they open their Instagram every morning because we have a new video drop of me like talking about a new development or a new restaurant opening. And then every week we do a home tour so I can remind people, hey, by the way, I am a real estate agent. This is how I make my living. And so it's like those subtle reminders, but just delivering high value. And so when somebody's ready, and it triggers like, oh yeah, I do know a real estate agent.
Yeah.
And actually, I'd love to work with this guy because he's given me so much and I don't even know it.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, on top of that, like just building that bond, even if it's from afar in advance of when the need actually occurs, like when they go looking for a real estate agent, who's gonna be the first one that pops into their mind? The guy who's on the park bench or the guy who's been delivering content and value in advance for 2 years? Have you ever heard the quote from Warren Buffett, price is what you pay, value is what you get?
Mm-mm.
You ever heard that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I think
That's a good one,
you're
though.
delivering a ton of value. Because the other thing too, right? Like you're in a very commodity-based industry where it's like, hey, here's the price of the home, pretty much for the most part, and tell me if I'm wrong, but almost every agent charges the exact same amount. So it's
Well, you can't
very
say that because that's what got us in a whole lot of trouble last year with a national lawsuit against the real estate association and big brokerages. So when I have a conversation with somebody about commission, I say, this is what I charge because I know my value.
yeah.
Right. And I very rarely get pushback on commission conversation because they have already received a ton of that value.
Yeah.
Right. And I've sat down with people like, I might not be the best person to sell your home. Like I haven't been in the business for 20 years, like, but I can get more eyes on your property than anybody else in Kansas City. So if you want that, well, maybe we could work together. And so it's put me in a position where I don't have to sell myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like people reach out because they already want to work with me, and that I think is like the recipe to not getting burnt out in this industry.
Yeah.
Like if I had to sit there and make cold calls every day, go knock doors, drive for dollars, do all these things, do open houses. I have 4 kids. I can't be gone, at open houses on Saturday and Sunday every weekend because I have 2 soccer games on Saturday and then we've got an event for our kids' school on Sunday, and it's like I'd miss everything,
Yeah.
And so it's delivering that value, and then now because we're growing and we're getting more people who are reaching out to us, and I can't do everything myself. I have 2 buyers agents on my team, in addition to the staff that we have, and so now it's just a matter of like I work with some clients still, but most of them just go direct to Kate or Ryan, and
Nice.
and then they work with the clients, and I just continue to do the content and work on the business, and that's kind of where we're going.
Nice.
So,
Yeah, because you can only have so many one-on-one conversations, right? But if 1 million people watched a video tomorrow, you invested that same amount of time producing that one video. So the media is much more leverageable versus manual labor, which a lot of people are doing, like you said, with the door knocking. You can only be at so many open houses at one given time, right? So yeah, I think that's definitely a hack that you have come across that's differentiated you from the rest of them too, because you can build that trust in mass. Like if somebody spent 20 hours watching your content, that's 20 hours that essentially you don't have to have one-on-one conversations with them because you've duplicated yourself through media.
Yeah. I mean, when I've told people before that when I have somebody that reached out to me that's watched 20 hours of my YouTube channel, it's better than a referral. Like, because they already feel like they know me. They're like, we literally sit in our living room and watch you on our television. Like YouTube is becoming the new, Friday night sit down and watch something. And especially when somebody's like considering moving to a different spot, like those are probably my best clients because they do consume so much of my content
Mhm.
because they just don't know about Kansas City.
Yeah.
And so once they watch 20 of my videos, they're like, I feel like I know so much more about the area
Yeah.
and I feel like I know you. And so,
Well, and you've been in their shoes before, right? Because you've
yeah.
been through the process of moving out of state, moving back to state. So I'm
Hmm.
sure there's a certain affinity that you have with that buyer avatar compared to somebody that's just moving houses inside of Kansas City that not a lot of other real estate agents probably have here.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely served us. One of the realizations that we've had recently though is like, we're not a huge relocation market. So it's like I do want to kind of tap into the, local buyers and sellers too with my content. And so there was a shift about 9 months ago on my channel where we kind of moved away from, and even today I try to cater to both people who are
Mhm.
relocating, but I'd lean more towards like the local buyers and sellers just because it's like, we're, you know, I think last year we had like 0.8% population increase in Kansas City Metro. And so
Oh,
it's
wow.
like, which equates to like 20,000 people or something like that. And that's a lot, but not all of
Yeah.
that population gain is coming from people moving here.
Right.
It's a smaller subset of that. So, I was like, what if we start catering more to people who live here too? And we've started getting listings and local buyers here from making that adjustment in our avatar and
Yeah.
like just understanding our audience and who is watching our content. Because if you go into your analytics, you can see who's watching. And it's like there are a lot of people in Kansas City that watch my content, even though I'm making relocation content. They're like, well, I disagree with this con or this pro or whatever. And so just recognizing, I was like, okay, well, if there are a lot of local people that watch it, then we should
Mhm.
probably make sure we're making content that they're interested in too.
Nice. So, last question for you. If somebody was, actually, let me rephrase that. If there was an underdog watching right now who maybe they're either looking at getting into business or maybe they're like, man, I know who Kyle is and I want to do exactly what he does. If you had to give them the playbook from from zero to where you're at now in 12 months, what's the 5 or 6 steps that you would personally take to get everything back where you are now if you were starting from zero?
I feel like you asked three questions in one question. I think the key for me is just like whatever you do it consistently for 12 months. Because you won't see results before then. And so it's like you can't go out and just try something for 30 days and be like, that didn't work, because maybe if you would have stuck with it for another 30 or 60 days, you would have gotten a lead or you would have gotten a reach out. And the first reach outs that we got were from renters. It's like, well, I can't really help you. I still get a lot of people that reach out that are renting in Kansas City, and like we can help, give you some recommendations for
Mhm.
apartments and stuff like that, but we can't really represent you. That's not what we do. But yeah, if you are just starting out and you're trying to figure it out and you have an idea and you believe in that idea, go with it. Trust your gut, trust your intuition. I think that because we live in a digital world now, like we're constantly taking in all these outside opinions, and then it leads to self-doubt, and then we start questioning whether we're doing this the right or the wrong thing. It's like if you trust yourself and you think it's a good idea, do it consistently for 1 year, for 12 months, and then you'll have enough information to know whether or not it's successful.
Put the
um,
blinders on.
and chances are you're going to come out from that experience a lot better than you were when you started because you have consistently practiced whatever it is that you're doing. But at the same time, like I feel like personally, if you do it consistently for 12 months, you will see success. It may not be a ton of success. For me, it was 7 transactions in the first 12 months, which on paper is I probably could have sold more houses cold calling, but it's not what I want, not want how I wanted to build my business, because I didn't want to be 3 years from that point still picking up the phone, doing 100 dials, getting hung up on,
Yeah. I've been
telling,
through that too, man. It's
yeah,
brutal.
I didn't want to do that, and so, and I believed in it and I kept going, and here we are. And it's like, the people that reach out to me are my ideal clients. They're people that I would want to work with.
Mm.
And it just makes everything so much easier.
Yeah. Have
But
you
it's a
heard
lot
of
of hard work.
have you heard of the rule of 5 1s?
Mm-mm.
I can't remember who the guy was that talked about it, but it's one avatar with one product, one lead generation, and one sales process for 1 year.
Mm.
So you basically, one thing,
Yeah.
right? What's your one thing?
Mm-hmm.
And just hammer that out for 12 months. So,
Yeah.
well, man, thank you so much for being the first guest on the Underdog
My
Chronicles.
pleasure, man.
I've
Yeah,
loved
thanks
this.
for having me.
We'll have to have you back like on the other podcast. I saw you do a repeat, so
Cool, man.
we'll
Yeah.
have to have you back.
Yeah. I'm excited to see how it goes.
If anybody wants to follow you, where can they find you?
Kyle Talbot KC on Instagram. If you just Google Kyle Talbot, I'll come up. My YouTube channel will usually come up there. But all of our, media inquiries, and you'll be able to find everything if you just follow me on Instagram. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Sweet, man.
Cool, man. Appreciate you.